you currently have driving anxiety, then hopefully this video is going to be a bit of a comfort for you. I have now been driving for just over a year. I passed my test in February 2023 and we're now in June 2024. So it's been just over a year, and it's probably taken most of a year, I would say, for me to feel like completely comfortable with driving. And I was like majorly anxious before, to the point where I didn't even want to get in the car, and I would like physically shake before I had to drive anywhere.
I can totally relate because I haven't learned to drive yet, and I haven't even had a single lesson. Like the one time that I got into the car, it was with Brad, and it was during lockdown, so we were at the school where Brad used to work and there was no one there. It was like the perfect opportunity really to like try and test my driving skills out because there was no one around. But the feeling of sitting behind the wheel, like I did not expect to feel so nervous.
It's very daunting.
Yeah, like I actually felt like I was about to cry.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd share my story from the beginning, and we can kind of talk through the milestones that I had and just how I started to like feel better about driving and just like overcome the anxiety, because I do feel like when you're in like the midst of it, it's really difficult to feel like there's ever going to be a time when you feel like completely comfortable and confident driving.
Yeah, and we've never actually had this conversation before either, have we? So it could be really helpful for me because I am still really nervous about just the idea of getting into a car.
Yeah.
I don't know, like I've still got that feeling of like, how can I be trusted like on a road with other cars in this massive, what feels like a massive vehicle?
Yeah, it
It's just
feels like
scary.
imposter syndrome, like
Yeah.
you just feel like you shouldn't be doing it, and especially when I passed my driving test, I had loads of imposter syndrome, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll rewind back to when I started learning, which was probably a similar time to when you got in the car. I first drove with my dad, so he had a Yaris at the time, a Toyota Yaris, and at that point I didn't know that that was going to be my first car, and because of COVID, like you said, it was really convenient to just go to car parks and just drive around them, and no one would be there because no one had like a reason for being there. So I remember the first time I got behind the wheel, I was in this tiny little car park. Like you say, when you first start to drive a car, the car just feels really massive, and even when you're going at like 2 miles per hour, it feels like you're going really quick. Like, it's just really scary.
And because we just don't have any car knowledge either, like we're not interested in cars in that way, so like learning to drive is literally like going from the very beginning, and it's very rare when you get to our age that you're actually ever doing that again, because usually you're building on skills that you already have, and I think that's what makes learning to drive so scary.
That's so true, yeah. And yeah, like you say, I didn't even know what a clutch was back then.
Yeah.
And to learn about that in itself is really confusing.
Yeah. For me it was like, even just the locations of like the brake versus the accelerator, and I was like, there was one time when we went down a small hill and I put my foot on the wrong one, and just stuff like that. I'd imagine it's quite common, but it's scary.
At first you just feel a little bit out of control, and I think that's why it was lucky that it was COVID and lockdown at the time, because it really was a great time to start learning. And with my dad at that stage, I never progressed onto the roads. It wasn't that I was a slow learner, but I was really nervous, and I think because of all the anxiety that I had, it was like slowing my progress down because I wasn't wanting to go onto the roads.
Yeah, whereas if you'd had an instructor, they probably would have been a bit more pushy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first time I ever had a proper driving lesson was as soon as we started to come out of lockdown. And anyone who's had driving lessons knows that on your first lesson, you are just taken on a road straight away. You go in a quiet area and you normally go at a quiet time, but it is still like a massive jump from being in car parks to being on the roads. I was learning for probably a year with an instructor, and then I took a driving test that I probably just wasn't ready for, and I don't even think that was like anxiety wise, I just think like skills wise I wasn't quite there, because I was still quite confused when it came to roundabouts and stuff like that. So I actually failed on a roundabout.
I don't know how people do those really intensive like 2-week courses,
No,
and then you can just feel like
do it.
skilled and confident enough to get on the road.
Yeah, for me it just wouldn't be enough time. Like I feel like I learned by just doing over and over again. I didn't pass my first driving test, but I did feel like at that point I knew everything that an instructor was able to teach me, and it was just a case of getting my confidence up and like doing roundabouts more.
Having that practice.
Yeah. So I went back to learning just with my dad and with my partner Milo, and I was doing that for another year or so, and in that time I had a second driving test. And I think actually this is one of the things that really knocked my confidence, because it was quite like traumatic, to be honest, and not like through the fault of me. I just had an examiner who was really anxious herself, which is just like strange, because why on earth you would be an examiner if you're like anxious about being in the car with learners? I've got no idea. But from the minute I got in the car, like, she just wasn't warm and friendly. Like, she didn't want to have a chat. She just wanted to get to it. And I could tell that she was just super nervous. Like, even if I like braked like a little bit over, like, they like you to do gentle braking. And if my brake was a little bit harsh, she would like throw her head forward, and she was just being really dramatic. And you know when you just don't get a good energy from someone, and then that kind of like feeds onto you and makes you more nervous.
Yeah, which is just not what you want when you're taking the driving test.
No, and thank God I've never experienced it again.
Yeah, I was really angry actually when you told me about this, because I was like, she must be doing this deliberately. Like, it seemed like she was like set out to sabotage.
Enjoying it, getting some enjoyment out of it. I don't know. But anyway, like, my manoeuvre that I was given was a parallel park, and she asked me to do it on a really busy road directly in front of a roundabout, which, like, when I think about that now, I just think how ridiculous. So like, the roundabout was here, so you come off the roundabout onto this busy road, and immediately after that she wanted me to parallel park.
And how often are you going to be doing that in a real life situation as well? Like,
I just wouldn't put myself in that situation.
Exactly.
I remember going to do the manoeuvre once, and as I was tucking in, I realised I was going to hit the curb. So I was like, okay, I need to go back out and adjust this, because if you hit the curb, sometimes it can be a fail. And at that point, I had a massive queue of cars behind me. So I was kind of like, oh, should I go again? Like, this is stressful. And she was like, go again, quite demanding. And I was like, okay, so I went back out again. And then I went in, and it was perfect parallel park this time, and I was really happy about that. And once you've parked in, you have to reverse 2 car lengths back. And I was like very aware that there was like a big queue behind me, so I was like, right, I'm just going to reverse like quite speedily, and you know, I've got a reverse camera, I was checking my mirrors, I was doing all this like safety stuff you're supposed to do. But I think because she was in such an anxious state, I think she panicked that I was reversing quite quickly. So she screamed like, stop, at me. And it really just like took me by surprise, because at the moment that she screamed it, I was about to like stop and put my handbrake on.
Yeah.
I did say to her like, oh yeah, I was about to stop, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like she was insinuating that there was a problem when there actually wasn't.
No, I was honestly miles away from the car behind me. I don't know why she screamed as well, like I just don't think that would like help anyone that's in like an examination situation.
It's actually crazy that she has that job.
Yeah, from that point I did kind of feel like I failed, because when an examiner intervenes, that is just like what happens. And after that, like the drive was like completely fine. There was one point actually when I think I like slightly touched the curb, and again she just screamed, and it was just so weird, like, because when I'm explaining this, like, if you don't know me and my driving, you could probably think, oh, maybe she was like ragging the car around and like doing some like really terrifying manoeuvres. But like, with me having driving anxiety already, like, I'm a very safe driver, and if anything I'm a bit too like slow and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely wasn't doing anything that would put her on edge. It was just the attitude that she had from the minute that she got in the car.
Yeah. I just think it's unprofessional anyway. Like, surely in that situation it's about remaining calm and taking over.
Yeah, and also like putting the students at ease. But anyway, like from that driving test, she did fail me for it, which I wasn't surprised about. But I remember just like crying my eyes out, like it was so awkward. Like, I didn't want her to see me cry, but as soon as she went away, I just like burst into tears. And it was mostly just through like anger, because I didn't feel like I'd deserved the fail, and just like the way that she was like throughout the test.
It does knock you back though, because I remember you saying to me like, I don't want to have to think about this anymore, like I don't want to have to do any more driving stuff, like I'm done, like you were just so fed up.
Yeah, obviously I was quite an anxious driver anyway, and I was already having this imposter syndrome, and then to be in a car with someone that was so nervous then just made me like question my driving ability and think like, is there a reason why? Like, even though like my rational brain knew that I hadn't done anything wrong, I think like subconsciously it really had an effect on me. And ever from that moment, I was just like, an even more nervous driver, and like nothing came of that. Like I didn't drive badly or anything, and like I passed my next driving test, but I remember beforehand I was just so nervous, like I genuinely thought I was gonna throw up. Like I was just that scared because of like the past one had given me almost like PTSD.
Yeah.
And I was going into it again and I was just thinking, oh, I really hope that I don't get someone like with a similar attitude to her.
Yeah, and it's such a shame that you have to worry about that as well. Like it should be guaranteed that you get someone that is perfect for the situation.
After that, I just felt like a complete imposter and I was just too nervous to drive by myself. So if I ever went anywhere, I would ask Milo to come with me. And we lived in the city centre at the time, which was quite convenient because I didn't have to do much driving. But if I ever needed to go anywhere, I would wait until the weekend when Milo was off work and we would go together, because I was just that nervous. And I remember the first time I got in the car by myself, it was probably like 5 months after I passed my driving test. And I remember just being so scared that I was shaking. So I was like holding the steering wheel, my arms were like shaking. And I remember I had my phone like propped on the side to navigate me. And then for some reason it just fell off. And then that just started like a whole load of chaos. Like as I was trying to reach it, like I turned my wipers on and I was like, when you're in a kind of car that you're unfamiliar with as well, I was kind of like, how do I turn my wipers off? It is really, really scary. And I would say for the first like 6 months or so, that was my experience every time I got in the car. Like I would feel sick before I got in the car, like I would feel just physically sick. I would have this feeling of like impending doom.
It's a really common thing though as well. Like I know so many people, and it does tend to be women who don't really get in the car that often, because even though they've passed the test, they do just feel kind of nervous.
Yeah, and I will say as well that the UK's roads are just like ridiculous to drive on. There's just so many hazards that you wouldn't imagine. Like, I mean, compared to America, whenever we've been there, like the roads are really wide and lovely and they're really straight and you don't get country roads. Whereas in England, like, we've got all sorts, like we've got one-way streets, we've got country roads that are so narrow that they might as well be one-way streets, but they're not.
And you're supposed to do like 60 on them.
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane. Like I've got a friend, for example, she's from Isle of Man and she won't drive over here because she just doesn't like the roads over here.
I think that's quite common. But with all of that said, you are obviously a lot more confident now and you do go out on your own. So what tips can you give to people about how they can like overcome their anxieties? Like, I don't know whether you still feel anxious on the road, but what do you do to kind of get over it?
So these days I don't feel anxious anymore unless I'm doing a journey that I've never done before in rush hour. Those are my 2 things that make me the most nervous, is like new journeys during rush hour, because it's like if I do mess up or like struggle with a road that I've never been on before and there's loads of people around, it feels like there's more pressure to like,
it's that
not
people
mess up.
pleasing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You always say to me like, if you're ever coming round, you're always like, I'm going to leave at like earlier. I'm not going to leave at 4 or 5. I'm going to leave earlier.
That's my first tip, to be honest, is if you're feeling nervous about driving, I know you don't always have a choice about like when you're going, but for me it really helped to go during times where the roads are quiet, because then you can learn the ways of the road without loads of people around you and like the pressure of like not messing up. So Sunday mornings were my favourite time to drive because no one's ever on the roads, like it's just so quiet and nice. But then at the same time, when I did start driving during rush hour, I feel like that really helped me to overcome a hurdle and it stopped me from fearing other people on the roads.
Yeah. I mean, I can't give any tips because obviously this is your journey, but I would say from my own experience doing things that I'm scared of, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
So you kind of do just have to put yourself out there, and the fear of the unknown kind of goes away because you're doing it so often.
Yeah, definitely. And like you do come to a point where, I know people always say this, but like it will eventually become second nature. And then when it does, it's like you can actually start enjoying the driving experience, which I do now. Like I know if I'm coming to yours, it's quite a long journey. It's like 2 hours, and I know that I can just like put a podcast on and just like enjoy myself. Like it's genuinely really enjoyable. Like it's so much more enjoyable than being a passenger.
Yeah.
But yeah, my therapist at the time actually gave me a really, really helpful tip because I spoke to her about it, which just goes to show that how much the anxiety was just taking over my life at the time. I felt like I passed my test and I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to drive. And she had a tip which sounds really simple, but it just never crossed my mind at the time. And she said, you don't have to keep going if you're scared, like you can pull in. So she was like, if you're driving and you feel like it's all getting a bit too much, like just take a left turn, get off the main road and just pull in somewhere at the side. And just her saying that, like it sounds so simple, but something changed in my brain and I was like, oh yeah, like I can. Yeah. Because I think that is the thing with anxiety, is like a lot of my driving anxiety was the fear around being stuck in a scary situation that I couldn't get out of.
Yeah. And also the pressure of having that entire journey that you know you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, when you know that you can break that journey down into little bits and you can always stop for a breather, it's way less stressful then.
Yeah. Another tip as well, which I've actually never done myself, but my friend gave me this tip. She's recently just done her driving test and passed. And this worked for her. So apparently, if you chew gum when you're driving, then you can trick your brain into becoming relaxed because your brain associates the chewing with eating. And apparently, when you're eating, you are more relaxed because going back to caveman times, we wouldn't eat if we were under threat. So your brain associates eating with relaxing. And I'm sure there's actually been studies done on this.
That's really interesting.
To show that chewing gum can calm anxiety. So a lot of people do it in their driving tests. And I wish that I'd have known about that, to be honest.
I mean, knowing me, I'd probably be the person that like choked on the chewing gum and then it just got way more dramatic than it was ever meant to be.
If you very slowly introduce driving into your life without trying to do it all at once, I think that's probably the best step to take. I know this isn't possible for everyone because I do work from home and I have that luxury, but I think you need to find the right balance between giving yourself a break from driving, but then also not letting that break go on for too long and then it getting to the point where you just, because for me, like if I hadn't driven for ages, I would just be like the anxiety would get worse because I'd be thinking like, oh, I've not done it in ages, like what if I mess up? So I think finding that balance is really important. And I just think as well, just like giving yourself grace and just like also thinking to yourself that all the other drivers on the road aren't perfect. Like, as much as people like to think that they are the perfect driver, like, no one is a perfect driver. Like, people make mistakes all the time. And the more you drive, the more that you'll notice, like, the amount of other people around you making mistakes. And that if you do make a mistake, like, it's normally not the end of the world at all.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, I was really nervous about making a really dangerous mistake. But then when you, like, realise, actually, having anxiety, like, you're more of a safe driver because, like, you don't want to take these risks and, like, you do drive a bit more defensively because your brain is always, like, looking for hazards. Most dangerous accidents are more likely to be caused by someone who's the opposite of an anxious driver and someone who's very erratic and just doesn't care about the rules. And the most that you're probably going to do is, you know, accidentally change lanes and piss someone off. That's literally it.
Yeah. I think something I've taken away from this is you're in control. So don't ever feel like you have to learn to drive really quickly and then get on the road. Like, I think that's a fear of mine because I've got Brad saying, oh, I can't wait until you can drive us home on the motorway. And to me, that's terrifying because it's like, that's the other extreme. I honestly think you can just go at your own pace. Even if you've passed your test, if you want to get the bus sometimes, then get the bus. Like, you don't have to be out in the car all the time.
Exactly. You just go at your own pace and do what feels comfortable to you. As long as you just keep pushing yourself to move forward, even if it's like slowly moving forward. And a side note as well is that the motorway is like the easiest roads ever. Like you'll grow to really love them. Like compared to country roads, you're just going straight on a long road. Like it's now my favourite thing to do. And I still remember the day when I drove for the first time by myself on a motorway, and that was like such a big deal to me. So I hope that you guys have found this video helpful, and if anything, if you can like realise that you're not the only person that's feeling this really intense anxiety, then that's something good that's come out of this video because you kind of feel quite alone in it, I guess. So if you have experienced any kind of driving anxiety for yourself and you've managed to overcome it, then please share your tips in the comments because there's probably a lot of things that I've missed and I know that everyone's experiences are like completely different. And if you're currently, you know, going through this anxiety, again, feel free to share. Let's have a friendly discussion in the comments. But yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed this video and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Now I realize it was always supposed to be.